Now, there is a major security problem in the Sahel region of Africa, containing and restraining the threat from jihadist insurgents. That is presenting an enormous challenge in an area that stretches across Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad, and Burkina Faso. And the area is vast, nearly 3 million square kilometers, with jihadist attacks spilling over into neighboring Nigeria. It is a sparsely populated region, largely impoverished and poorly policed, with porous borders exploited by drug runners, people smugglers, and transnational terrorist groups. Now you get the picture. No country can tackle this on their own. So even though it was France that intervened in 2013 to prevent an Al-Qaeda affiliate from overrunning the Malian capital Bamako, it was subsequently agreed that a collective effort was essential. So today, 2 military missions are now running concurrently. The UN peacekeeping mission with 56 nations and over 14,000 troops, and the separate French-led counter-terrorism mission known as Operation Barkhane. But now that is also under threat.
The lasting presence in the framework of external operations of France cannot be the substitute to the return of the state and state services, political stability and the choice of sovereign states. We cannot secure areas that fall back into anomie because states decide not to take their responsibilities. It is impossible, or it is a never-ending job. This transformation will result in a change of model. It will involve the transition to a new framework. That is to say, the end of the Barkhane operation as an external operation.
And that's the French President Emmanuel Macron. There. Well, for more on this, let's cross to Washington and speak to Rida Lyammouri, who is a senior fellow at the Policy Center for the New South and an expert on the Sahel region of Africa. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I hope I didn't slaughter your name there. I do have those challenges myself when I have to get other people to pronounce my surname. But let's first of all get you to set out for us what you see as the challenges in the Sahel region today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As you mentioned, there are multiple issues, multi-dimensional conflicts, ongoing conflicts in the region. So while the focus is on jihadist groups and the threat of terrorism, but the region have been facing multiple issues for decades. And the extremist groups, when they arrived in the 2000s, and they exploited those existing conflicts and what became today just very difficult and challenging to resolve, as it has proven in the past decade. We are approaching to a decade since the eruption of the conflict in northern Mali in January of 2012. Which allowed extremist groups to take over northern Mali and occupy and govern the area for almost a year before the French intervention in January of 2013. And even with that intervention and the arrival of the French, which stopped the expansion of jihadist groups to the southern Mali, we have seen that these groups managed to survive and also expand and to new areas, especially to Niger and Burkina Faso. And as I mentioned, multi-dimensional, and we focus on violent extremist organizations like affiliated to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. But also there are existing domestic issues and tensions that are taking place in different parts of these countries that extremist groups manage to exploit and generate some sort of legitimacy and some support from communities. And it's easy to say that those local states struggled to address their own issues, but as you mentioned in the introduction, these are vast geographic areas. And for countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso that are ranked among the poorest countries in the world with very limited resources, so to govern that space, it's really challenging. And it's not just a question of them not being able to govern that space or to reach some communities that are far, far from the capitals, but they simply just don't have the resources or the capabilities to do that.
Well, I mean, in a very small space of time, you've set out very comprehensively what the real challenges are and the potential threat from that region, beyond, of course, the domestic issues that you talked about, the difficulty for the countries there to be able to deal with their own security. From an international perspective, you mentioned that both the Islamic State group and Al-Qaeda, as well as other rivals, have taken a strategic decision to make Africa their new priority after suffering setbacks in the Middle East. I mean, how dangerous does that make the region today?
It's safe to say that it's dangerous, and when we look at the increase of violence and also increased territories that both groups, Al Qaeda and Islamic State, that are able to occupy, or not necessarily occupy and govern, but to operate. They do occupy some territories around the Lake Chad basin, mainly the Islamic State affiliated group known as ISWAP, and also the remaining of Boko Haram around the Lake Chad basin. The situation in the Sahel is a little bit different because of the long-term existence of Al-Qaeda affiliated group. And then the arrival in 2015 of the Islamic State, which established itself in northern Mali, in the Gao region, and then later on managed to expand to Niger and Burkina Faso. I would not say that they made Africa their focus based off what happened in Syria and Iraq, but I think they just look at is it strategic or not. I think they look at where they are able to implement themselves and to continue to have some sort of presence where they could demonstrate to their followers they are still there. They continue to operate, and despite ongoing and increased counterterrorism efforts. I would say also in the Sahel region that the Islamic State affiliated group and Al-Qaeda both have established themselves in those areas that it's becoming very, very difficult for the international community as well as local governments to return and reestablish in the short term their presence. The access that these groups have demonstrated among communities that have this existing grievances toward the central government, it's unmatchable. The states are not able to match that access and match those capabilities, and now it's becoming more difficult, not in terms of security standpoints, but also prevention and trying to prevent the conflicts from spreading. The communities are now feeling also not just necessarily neglected by their governments, but also they are being stigmatized by central government. And we are seeing examples where the Fulani communities, for example, increasingly being stigmatized and accused of supporting and aligning themselves with either Islamic State or Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, and therefore they are targeted by security forces. And there are acts of atrocities that are well documented by the security forces and abuses of human rights, which gives extremist groups the narrative to generate support by saying, look at the state. It is targeting you. They are neglecting you, and we are here to defend you and give you the opportunity to defend yourselves. So the threat, it is more domestic and more regional, or more on the region rather than global. We have not seen both groups in the Sahel or Lake Chad Basin making statements that they want to target European countries or they wanted to target the US, for example. So the focus is domestic.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, that even then, it sounds incredibly frightening and very dangerous indeed. Please stay with us. We want to talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the growing problem of insecurity in the Sahel region. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, the effort to stave off an encroaching takeover by extremists in the Sahel is facing severe challenges. President Macron has threatened to pull out more than 5,000 French troops in Mali if the coup leaders carry out their suggestion of making a deal with the same Islamist insurgents the troops are fighting. Britain, which is around 400 troops currently deployed in Mali, has joined regional leaders in condemning the second coup there in 9 months. There's also the multinational UN peacekeeping mission in the region, but that too appears to be uncertain. So how much does all this matter for West Africa and the region? And could it have a knock-on effect for other parts of the world? And Rida Lyammouri, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South and an expert on the Sahel region of Africa, is still with me on the line from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. So the effect of the chaos, the violent extremism and insecurity that you so eloquently outlined at the outset, taking further hold in Mali and other Sahel nations, is the possibility of the emergence of a new base for jihadists in the region. In those circumstances, why is France withdrawing its troops in the face of such a threat?
Very good question. I think this came in a very critical time while these groups continue to expand. The French decided to not necessarily to pull out, I think to reduce the number of its troops in the region. And this remains to be seen, and what Macron will decide to do by the end of this month, as he mentioned. I think this is not necessarily going to be a total pullout from the region, but it's more of an adjustment of its strategy. I think the two things that President Macron mentioned, they are already in place with the new takeover force that was created and established starting the last year of 2020. I think it's going to continue to carry mainly counterterrorism operations in addition to joint operations with the local forces. So not necessarily totally pull out. And also, we need to remember that Barkhane is not just operating in Mali, but also in Niger, partially in Burkina Faso, as well as Chad. The idea and the potential for these groups, Islamic State and Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, to expand and find a new stronghold. This is already happening, and anyone who's following will see some trends of these groups trying to expand into northern Côte d'Ivoire, northern Benin on the borders between Burkina Faso, Niger, and northern Togo, also to northwest Nigeria. So the idea of expansion is already there. How far is it going to be? That remains to be seen. And definitely there is a concern, and the coastal states of West Africa are totally concerned. And there is already ongoing efforts by the French and as well as the US, bilateral efforts with countries like Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Benin, and Togo in finding a way to prevent this expansion. And these groups have this strategy of continuing to find communities as well as geographic areas where they could establish themselves, that states in the region as well as their international partners are unable to reach. And from there, they build ties and create what we say like convenient marriage with either, as you mentioned in the introduction, with drug lords, drug traffickers, or all sorts of bad actors, and they establish these relationships, even if they might not agree on the ideology. But the ultimate goal for them is to disrupt state presence and also disrupt any international intervention in the area. So the threat is there of expansion to coastal states, and we are seeing already activities, as I mentioned, in northern Benin, northern Cote d'Ivoire, as well as even to be confirmed in northern Ghana.
And I mean, in terms of the French and the way they've prosecuted their operations in the Sahel, there have been allegations of French troops killing civilians, and it's something that's raised huge amounts of anger in the Sahel countries. And additionally, the fact that France is was the former colonial power in the region and has now returned with military strength, that has created considerable unease, hasn't it?
Absolutely. When we look at the images from 2013, when the French came in and liberated the towns of northern Mali, people were going onto the streets, celebrating and chanting François Hollande and carrying the French flags. However, that changed as time passes and the situation remained unstable. People grow frustrated and rightly so, because they are seeing that the situation continued to get worse rather than being resolved. And the pressure on the local armies as well as on Barkhane has forced to take extra measures when it comes to counterterrorism, the arrests, sometimes without justification of some locals, and that created some anti-French sentiments, especially in the north of Mali. And that's why we have seen protests asking the French to leave for the past 3 years, and this narrative continued to grow, and even became worse after the airstrikes earlier this year in Bonti in central Mali, where more than 20 civilians been killed, and the UN carried an investigation and confirmed that they were civilians. In addition to that, there were other events where the French made arrests without justification, and the French repeatedly refused to accept and acknowledge the errors made. And that just continued to build on and made the perception towards the French just deteriorate, not necessarily among all the Malians or the West Africans, and especially Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, but among some who managed to exploit that negative perception. And I think going forward, for the French, for France to continue operating in the area, they need to find a way on acknowledging and accepting when errors are made, so people will appreciate rather than trying to ignore and deny what's been obvious, because locals are able to see those things, seeing what's happening, and we cannot neglect how important the perceptions of locals are.
Right. We've got about a couple of minutes before we have to go. Let me ask you this. What is the current state of the collective international effort in the Sahel? Because, I mean, there's supposed to be a UN peacekeeping mission made up of, from what I understand, 56 countries with about 14,000 troops. In the face of such a large international security presence, are they managing to contain the jihadists, or can such focused Western intervention only go so far?
Absolutely, it can only go so far, and the mandate of the UN mission in the peacekeeping mission in Mali. It's important to note that it's just focused on Mali, and also its mandate does not allow them to go after jihadists, to carry attacks against jihadists, but to protect the populations. But then once the mission was deployed, they realized that the danger it's very high and the risks are very high. And the mission now becoming more concerned, and at least for the first few years, we're more concerned about protecting themselves rather than trying to protect the population. And while the focus of the mandate and the mission was on northern Mali, since 2015 and 16, the situation worsened in central Mali, and they had to expand to central Mali. And that became the result. The situation continues to show that this foreign interventions are very limited.
Rida Lyammouri, I want to thank you very much indeed for your insights today. And Mr. Lyammouri is a senior fellow at the Policy Center for the New South and an expert on the Sahel region of Africa, and he was speaking to me from Washington.